5 albums to introduce you to death metal part 2. If you're trying to get into death metal, don't know where to start, use this list as a guide. Check out part 1 for 5 more essentials, but you could definitely start here as well. Number 1, Obituary, Slowly We Rot, debut album by the Florida death metal pioneers. One of the many essential early death metal albums recorded by Scott Burns at More Sound Recordings. Obituary really stand out from a lot of the other bands of this era with a unique songwriting style and a really dynamic pacing. They kind of seesaw between full speed sonic onslaughts and some much slower, doomier passages, which makes this album have a different flow than a lot of the other albums recorded in this time period. John Tardy also has a really over-the-top vocal style that brings to mind the wails of a bloodthirsty zombie, making Obituary one of the most inimitable bands of this era. Number 2, Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated, one of the most notorious and popular death metal bands of all time. This is their third of 4 classic albums recorded with original vocalist Chris Barnes. And although current vocalist George Corpse Grinder Fisher is among the most respected in death metal history, many, including myself, still consider Cannibal Corpse's first 4 albums to be their most essential. Tomb of the Mutilated is really the perfect place to start. It features some of their live staples like Hammer Smash Face and I Come Blood. And despite Cannibal Corpse's infamous reputation, they're surprisingly easier to get into than a lot of the other death metal bands of this era, as that a lot of their music sits in a pretty groovy mid-pace with some of the catchiest songwriting in the genre. Number 3, Entombed, Left Hand Path. Swedish death metal pioneers, this album helped to popularize the iconic buzzsaw guitar tone, which is still really popular in extreme music today, particularly with hardcore and metalcore bands. And Entombed really are a band that's as influential to later death metal bands as they are to modern hardcore bands. They always kind of brought a level of grit and swagger that's more commonplace in hardcore than death metal. On top of that, they have a really catchy, punchy songwriting style that's pretty easy to get into for new listeners and makes this one of the most emulated death metal debuts of all time. Number 4, Suffocation, Pierced from Within, New York, brutal technical death metal masters. And if this feels similar to Cannibal Corpse, it's because they're both from New York and they're 2 of the bands that most helped to shape and define the East Coast death metal sound that really has a knuckle-dragging heaviness, but Suffocation bring even more intricate and technical songwriting. Vocalist Frank Mullen's signature gutturals are unmatched. Terrence Hobbs is a virtuoso axeman, and Doug Bone delivers one of the greatest drumming performances in history across the length of this album. Suffocation, along with Cryptopsy, are really the gold standard for this type of brutal technical death metal, but this is definitely an album that requires some attention to truly appreciate, as the intricacies of the songwriting are really the star of the show, not just the brutality and the heaviness. Number 5, Deicide, self-titled, another Florida masterpiece, another album recorded with Scott Burns at More Sound Recording, and another band that really manages to carve out their own lane in the crowded early death metal scene. Whereas bands like Cannibal Corpse and Obituary feature cartoonishly over-the-top, gory imagery, lyrics, album art, Deicide were aiming to create something truly evil. The band's anti-religious MO could easily come off as a shtick if their music wasn't so dark and extreme, but this is just relentless riffing, pummeling blast beats, freakish guitar solos, and most importantly, some disturbing vocals from vocalist Glenn Benton. He was a seriously intense dude, and these vocals are anguished and pain-filled and bleak and demonic, unlike anything else that the genre had to offer at this point in time. To this day, the vocals on this album really stand the test of time as some of the darkest and most evil ever recorded in death metal. Alright, that's the 5. Definitely check those out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think should be on here, and stay tuned for part 3. Thanks so much for watching, and subscribe for more like this.